Hello, everyone. It's exactly 4 p.m. in Singapore, and we are really thrilled to have another knowledge building session with you on learning about AI and learning with AI. Today, we will be covering the topic on key concepts and frameworks on artificial intelligence and education. And for that, we have a brilliant speaker today. Some of you have met her, Miss Sopio ZHGNETI, and she will be covering this session in an interactive workshop format. So before I give the floor to Sophie, here are some notes for you. Please mute yourself as usual and participate as interactively as possible. Today we have quite a few interactive elements designed by Sophie. And raise your hand if you have any questions. And of course, you can also, as usual, type in the chat box, which you have been doing really well, and also supporting one another by already answering the questions. And please be precise when you share your questions and comments. So with that, a little bit about Sophie. Apart from the thematic expertise on AI and education, she has a decade-long classroom teaching and learning experience like you, and she has a very strong understanding of innovative teaching and learning and pedagogy. So with further ado, let's invite Sophie. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Very nice to see some of the familiar faces. I will now try to share my screen. Just 1 second. And I think we can start. Jyoti, you see the screen well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, cool. Amazing. So as Jyoti, thank you, Jyoti, for a lovely introduction. Today is, as I believe, your second session, and we're going to talk about some of the key concepts and frameworks on artificial intelligence in education, briefly called AI&ED, a weird name. Before we start, I would just say briefly who I am. I am Sopio ZHGNETI. But I am from Georgia, so you can call me, Sopio is a bit weird to pronounce, so you can call me Sophie. I respond to both names. At the moment, I am working at British-Georgian Academy. I'm heading Department of the Assessment and Curriculum, but I've been, I started as a teacher. I'm teaching as well, mostly teaching English language, sometimes English language and literature. So I have quite a vast experience in that. My research interest lies in AI in education, more specifically generative AI, ChatGPT and its impact on higher education. I am trying to look at AI tools from a critical perspective. So if this workshop comes from that stance and from that position, that's because of my research interests. So just to give you some heads up, you are all teachers, and probably you all hate when you have to sit down and listen to a monologue. So I'm going to try my best to ask you as many questions as possible. So please don't be shy. When I ask something, you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, or maybe if you don't want to speak, use the chat to write your answers. So let's start. These are some of the objectives for today. We're going to start by identifying some key concepts in AIED. We will continue by talking about some of the promises versus reality of these tools. We will start also talking about how to develop critical thinking in students, and I will be very pleased to listen to some of your brilliant ideas about that. And then if time allows, we are going to do some of the practice activities, but we'll see about that because last 15 minutes is dedicated for you for them to ask the questions. And then we will wrap up, and that's going to be it. So let me start with a question. So as you know, there are many different representatives of AI, and you are probably using or have used already some of them. If you can unmute yourself or maybe use the chat to write down if you have used any of the AI tools in your classroom, and what are those, and what's your experiences with them? Okay. So I know that we have quite many participants. I see 39, and probably Jyoti and the others, including them. So And it's quite amazing that we have such a diversity of teachers from Europe and Asia. So I believe it will be nice to see your experiences because we are all coming from different contexts. Let me see the chat. Okay. Hello, hello. So have you used any of the AI tools in your classroom? Four tools: ChatGPT, DALL-E, Gemini. Okay. GPTs, a lot of GPTs. Okay. Suno, yes, ChatGPT. Okay, so yeah, and obviously I anticipated that there would be a lot of ChatGPTs. It would be interesting to see the results 2 years ago, before we had ChatGPT. So I am curious about, how do you use ChatGPT in your classroom? So what do? You generate lesson plans, you create activities, just out of curiosity. What do you do with them? Copilot, because we have Microsoft license. Okay, interesting. OpenAI quizzes. Okay, Bing Create. Okay. Mostly activities. Okay. Nice. Magic School. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Interesting. Mostly I see creating tasks and improving existing projects. Okay. Let me ask you, is your experiences positive or negative? Mostly. Easier my work as a teacher to make lesson plans. Okay, that's interesting. Both. Okay, it has some weaknesses and some positive aspects as well. Positive. Okay, for most part. Okay, thank you very much. So before we start talking about some of the problematic issues and benefits as well, I just wanted to say that, despite the fact that last year, due to the introduction of the ChatGPT, artificial intelligence became the new internet sensation, and it became the subject for talking for most of everyone, I think, in education. It has been here for a very long time. It has been the subject of the research in education, at least I would say 40 plus years. And there has always been this expectation that, AI is going to revolutionize the education system. And I'm going to say even more that even before AI, when we had developed some technologies like television, radio, the people we're talking about actually revolutionizing the education system through those systems as well. So it's not a novelty that when ChatGPT and generative AI appeared, everyone started talking about that. Okay, it's going to change everything in education. However, 1 year has passed, and we see that, not many things has changed in that regard, in a way that some of the crucial aspects of education, the way we are delivering our knowledge in terms of classroom settings, the understanding of the student roles and teacher roles, it all has stayed the same mostly, I would say, right? So, and throughout this history of the development of the AI, it has been said that these hypes that surround AI might be sometimes overhyped as well. So they make some over promises that not always might be true. It's interesting for me, before ChatGPT, I know the answer before ChatGPT, but I'm curious about now. What is the first thing that comes to your head when you hear artificial intelligence? You can again use the chat, or you can again switch on your microphone if you want to. So that okay, help. Nice. Okay. First thing that comes to your head. Making lives a bit easier. Machine learning, cheating. Okay. Smart robots. Yes. So I remember when my lecturers were making the same experiment, most of the people in our classroom, and it was before ChatGPT, we said robots. And robots has been, the talking about the robots has been with us also, I think, since artificial intelligence was created. And here we have nice examples of the robots. And yeah, our understanding used to be that we should create this brilliant robot that is going to serve humans and automate lots of tasks and make our lives easier. However, it's very, very important to understand that despite the fact that nowadays in education we have this sort of tendency to talk about artificial intelligence, and link it to ChatGPT and generative artificial intelligence. There are other models that has been with us for quite a long time as well. And these are some of the terms, the key concepts of AI models that has been around. It's not a limited list. There are many others. For example, have you ever heard about any of these systems? Learning analytics, let's say. And so that I don't speak to myself, maybe there is someone who wants to use the microphone as well. I know it's quite a specific question and you might not know, so it's absolutely fine. Do you know any of these systems, or have you ever tried any of these systems? No. Okay, so I'm sure that you have tried. You might not yet know what they are because they are called a bit technically, and it's difficult to associate. For example, let's say learning analytics, right? We started from there. Learning analytics is basically a system where scientists are sort of collecting the data about the students, and then based on that data, they're trying to make some interpretations. For example, on Moodle, I was part of that experiment as well. My lecturers were counting how many times students would download certain material. And then based on that, they would make certain interpretations. Let's say if a student hasn't downloaded any material, it would mean that the student is not learning anything. If the video has never been opened, it would mean that, that the video that was uploaded by a teacher, it would mean that the student didn't understand the content. And then it would allow certain early interventions, right? Now, all good stuff. Then it would also play a role into curriculum creation. It would allow teachers to give some kind of a feedback to students on that. Since you are not engaging much, you should maybe download more. However, do you see any problems with that? Can we make such general interpretations based on this data? I'm just asking. One would be the ethical issues, yes. Yes, it allows for intervention. Good. No problem. So for me, for example, when I was part of the experiment, it allows you very well also to see the weaknesses because you are the subject of the experiment, basically. For me, despite the fact that some people would open the video, it does not necessarily meant that students understood the content or made the right interpretations. Sometimes they would open it and would not watch it. Sometimes they would watch it, but the content would be too difficult. So the fact that you have opened doesn't necessarily mean that you understood. So the interventions that you would probably be making to students who are not at least opening it up at all would be probably correct, unless a student is getting a material from a friend, let's say. And there are other loopholes as well, but interventions for those people who would not be able to understand despite the opening up the material would not take place. Yeah, that is one issue. Somebody mentioned the ethical aspect of it. And obviously, when we are collecting these kinds of data, especially, I'm going to mention another weird term now, multimodal learning analytics. It's already a different level of learning analytics where scientists are collecting the gestures and eye-gazing patterns from the students. And then based on that, they would try to interpret what this means. So, for example, I was like a videographed during the lecture, and then when we would be given the group work, they would count how many times I looked at my partner while I would have an interaction, and then based on that, they would try to say whether I was fully engaged or not. And then the computer system is trying to automate this system, and then when the person sits in front of a computer, so that the observation is automated and a teacher is not needed to be everywhere, but the computer is doing the teacher's job in a way that if I look away, it means that I'm not interested or I'm not involved in the task, and then a teacher can give me the feedback based on that. So, and again, collecting data issues come into play here in terms of the ethical bits. Students don't always feel confident, or comfortable when these things are being done. It helps surveillance, and sometimes it can be hard for a student to do the discovery when you are asked to be constantly involved. Sometimes you as a student need that time around to to wonder about things, just to have a little bit of time for yourself while you are on the task. So this automation is another interesting aspect of the MLA. There are other stuff as well: intelligent tutoring system, personalized learning systems, adaptive learning systems. Most of them are quite problematic for me because they are based on the fact that we understand how students learn and teachers teach, but the reality is that it's highly complex terms, and we don't always understand how this interaction between teacher and the student happens. How we can't even make sure that when we teach, students learn exactly what we want them to understand or what we want them to learn, because it's such a live process. And automating those tasks at the moment, in my belief, and I have never seen any evidence of this, that it is large scale. It's working on a large scale at the moment, at least. So yes, we have all this, and at the same time, finally, we have generative AI, generative artificial intelligence. So who can tell me what is generative AI? And I'm sure it's been so long around already that you will have a very good definition of it. How does it work? What is it? What does it do? And so on and so forth. Anything that you know about it. What it is based on, what does it, how does it function? I see wonderful comments about the previous slide. For example, LA doesn't represent the reality exactly. The mood for learning is not included, obviously. It should be combined with other means. Yes, that's a very good comment. It can be one if the data privacy issue is solved, because we are talking about the underage kids, and collecting the video data is quite problematic. And I think Juliet wrote about the anxiety. That is why one of the study, for example, had to be stopped, because students felt extremely anxious about it. And so very, very nice comments I see. Yes. So yeah, large language models processing data and giving outputs based on their algorithms. Yes. Very good. It generates information available to it, meaning that it uses large amount of data. Good. It is based on data. Yes. It is trained on large language models. Yes. Yes and yes. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it because I think you already know. Yes, it is based on large language models. That means that it takes the information from the internet. Before this time, it was quite difficult to come up with the generative AI because this amount of data was not available on the internet. The fact that it uses the data from the internet has its huge weaknesses, including some of the biases, some of the dangers to repeat some of the tendencies that internet dictates, and we'll talk about it a bit later as well. But the question that I'm asking in most of my sessions is, as teachers, what kinds of fears do you have about this new tool? What makes you most fearful about? Somebody wrote cheating in the beginning. I think it will be there because it's one of the biggest fears in my view. But what else in your context? What do you think is the most okay? Ruth is writing, I've allowed my students to explore OpenAI AI and improving their reflection logs. It was disappointing to read ChatGPT's reflections. Not my learners. I miss my learners' English. Yes, ethics. Yes, so that students could believe generative AI results are true. Yes, very good. Convergent ideas. Students might feel threatened. Okay. Interesting, Isabel. Could you please elaborate on that? Why exactly they might feel threatened? I have some ideas, but I'm just curious about yours. Teachers not learning what it is and how it can be meaningfully used and ethically. Becoming mainstream creates a gap between generations. Yes, as all the technologies, I guess. Our students at the moment, my students at least, are using it so extensively. I'm afraid that I am, falling behind. So I'm using it as well, just to make sure that we are on the same track. Lack of skills to use. Yes, I think lots of good stuff. And these fears are quite legitimate. And I'm gonna come back to fears just a bit, and I will move to more positive bit. Promises. So when ChatGPT was publicly launched, the people were talking about some of the amazing stuff it's gonna do. So what are the promises for you that ChatGPT, a generative AI, let's say in general, because we have now other examples as well apart from ChatGPT, right? So what are the promises that these tools promise to you, what are the promises that they give to you as a teacher? So what do you want to see in them? Time saving, yes, one of the biggest. One-to-one instruction and quality education. Okay. Personalized responses. Okay. Big terms, lots of big terms. Thank you. So, these are the two main things that usually come up when we are talking about the promises, right? So, however, it's quite interesting to see, is it a fact or a fiction? Because I am researching these areas, I am looking at a lot of academic papers on these topics, and obviously the two main promises are saving teachers' time and then personalized learning. And saving teachers' time again didn't start with ChatGPT. So I don't know about your context, but in Georgia, I also lived in the UK for quite a bit. And in there as well, teaching profession is associated with an extreme stress. Usually, it's driven by excessive workload, which affects the well-being, retention, and recruitment of the teachers. And most of the time, people were trying to come up with techno-solutionism, saying that, okay, guys, you have this tool and it's gonna, save your time now and you can do whatever you want. Meanwhile, maybe, not whatever you want, but teach meanwhile. However, it's interesting that starting from the very beginning, there was this guy Skinner who had this revolutionary idea. He came up with a machine that would create this massive a tool that would be able to teach masses. So like instead of you having, let's say, 30 students in the class, there would be hundreds of the students and they would be sitting all in front of a machine, and it would be automated in a way that when a student would be given a slip of paper, there you would have to, you would have, based on the students' input, the machine would make the tasks more difficult or easier. It was highly automated in a way that it was repetitive. So the tasks were repetitive. The whole drill learning came out of, it was basically based on the drill learning. the time passed, people understood that Skinner's learning machines do not really work. And then, this all came, transformed into a different ideas that now the generative AI will be able to save teachers' time. I don't know about you. In my experience, when I try to use generative AI for my lessons to create activities, I still have to spend a lot of time designing them, because first of all, the tasks that come out of it is not something that goes through a filter in a way, right? So it collects information from the internet. So I have to go through each of the tasks and make sure that they are quality-wise there where they're supposed to be, one thing. A second thing, apart from double checking the facts are correct or not, apart from looking at the types of the resources, creating those tasks also take some time to make ChatGPT do what I want to do. And to be skilled in that in a way takes, I think that in that time I would be able to create my own content in a way. And there are also the risks associated with it that you need to, balance out of what you are putting. If the information that you are putting includes the diversity in terms of if minorities' voices are heard in there or not, because usually what these tools are doing is that they are excluding those voices, right? So for me, it's more like not really saving, but redirecting my time in a way that, yeah, but that's my experience, and that's what I've been asking some teachers as well. Yes. Thank you, Jyoti. I just had a look at it. Yes. And another one is a personalized learning experience. I'm not going to stop to talk too much about it, but I would say that maybe instead of personalized learning experience, we should say customized learning experience, because it looks like that these tools are promising personalized learning. But if I ask each one of you now what personalized learning is, I do believe that your understanding would be much deeper than what these tools offer. For me, it's more like a Netflix where they are customizing based on your likes and dislikes of what content to give you, but that's not a true personalization. So I would recommend you to read. There's this very good article produced in last year, 2022, by Caroline Pelletier. I can then send a link to it if you are interested. So we talked about all this, some of the weaknesses, fears, promises, and so on and so forth. But what's the most important, I think, and what is the core in this session is the skills. So what skills shall we develop in our students and how to develop them, right? So for me, it's first of all the critical thinking. Most of the times when I read about artificial intelligence in education, I see that a lot of, quite a big responsibility is put on teachers to teach with AI, and on students to learn with AI. But mostly we are pushed to teach with AI, and then we start talking about the technical support, if there is enough trainings for us available to teach us how to teach with AI and how to use these tools. And we are all, if we don't use those tools, we are sort of regarded as, outdated teachers. And there is always this fear that, okay, I want to be updated. And obviously, these are all legitimate ideas. But what I want you to redirect your attention to is not learning with AI, but learning about AI and teaching about AI. Because I do believe that if you do not have information about AI, you cannot and you should not teach with AI, because it's too risky, because these tools are associated with too many risk factors and weaknesses. So I don't know if you agree with me or not, but at least that's how I view it, that you should have information about it so that you can create tasks that make students critically assess each and every output of these tools. Why? Well, first of all, because these tools can be wrong, and our students are novices, and they might not be able to understand it. and it's our job that they have awareness about it, right? And there are also other serious issues as well. We will talk about it a bit later. Okay, so yeah, what should we teach? I wanted to introduce this a framework for you. It was created by UNESCO. It's a competencies framework. And the idea is that the emergence of a set of AI literacy skills required. So this a framework recognizes this emergence of a set of AI literacy skills required for effective human-machine collaborations. And if you look at it, you have here a very balanced way of working with and about AI. So you have benefit risk analysis of why you are using these tools. Is it beneficial, or we are using it for the tick that I have to use it? What does it give to the student? The thing that I forgot to mention is that these tools are with us already, and if we ignore them, and I have ignored them, it doesn't change the reality that our students are using them. So I think that it's our main job as teachers is to make sure that a lot of you mentioned the ethical use of it. We make sure that they are using them effectively and ethically. So you have your ethical principles. We have safe and responsible uses. We have, for example, creating with AI as well, but it's also an AI-assisted teaching. We also have AI to support professional transformation and so on. Obviously, this is not a final version. It's just a draft, but a nice one to look at if you are interested in what competencies we as teachers should develop. And then on the other hand, you have the student version, for example, human agency, we have safe and responsible use, we have application skills, problem scoping, and so on and so forth. It's going to be very difficult to talk about each one of them because of the time restrictions. I know that I have 15 more minutes with you. So I wanted to show this to you just to tell you that these are the main competencies that there are other frameworks as well. For example, there is an EU framework that you can look at, but I think this one was quite nicely done, so that's why we shared it with you. Where is this UNESCO framework published? If you Google, it's gonna appear on the UNESCO official website, and you can track it down. I think it's part of the Beijing consensus. So thank you so much, Jyoti, for help. Jyoti kindly put there some of the links. So as you could see, ethics of AI was quite a big part of that framework, and I wanted to pay extra attention to it as well. So obviously there are lots of issues with these tools that you should raise awareness with your students. What do you think the major issues are? Let's put it that way. You can again use the chat. What do you think are the biggest ethical concerns regarding the generative AI? Let's have a look at your answers. Yes, Susanna, this is still a draft format. I don't know exactly when it's going to be published. To be honest, I don't have that information. But once it's published, it's going to appear on the UNESCO website again, and I think it's going to be cited quite a lot. Yes, data protection, taking over human creativity and thinking, very good. Data privacy, amazing. Yes. So exercising excessive control, taking AI's idea as our own copyright issues, and there are lots of copyrights lawsuits at the moment against ChatGPT, data protection, plagiarism. Well done. Yes, amazing. Not responding copyright, deep fakes that has been around and been quite problematic. Thank you so much. Yes, all the very highly problematic issues that has been identified. There is this saying, I didn't even know that it was said by Humbly. I have no idea who he is. I'm sorry, forgive my ignorance, but data has been compared with the new oil for a very, very, since they started creating the this large language models based on the big data. Why data is the new oil? Because it can be monetized, and the profits out of it is just extreme. And as oil, it also has its very big disadvantages. Yeah, a lot of you mentioned the data security. Lots of my students did not realize that the data that has been logged on those generative AI tools have been used. We don't really think about that when we are using these tools at all. In some of the context, for example, when I was asking about this to my classmates, for example, from some of the Asian countries, they were also scared to that this information would be used against them somehow. But the idea is that when we need to be aware that we have no idea how our data will be used in the future. And this data can be quite sensitive. You will be surprised what kind of sensitive information gets onto ChatGPT from this and generative AI in general from the youngsters, right? Second one is we do not know the outputs, what kind of data is coming to us. Unfortunately, at the moment, generative AI is a black box. Why it is a black box? Because we don't understand it. We don't understand the how the outputs are generated. We know the general systems, but we do not know what sorts of biases the algorithms have. We do not know what sorts of, how it can be, who creates those algorithms, and how it can be used against us. Because if we become over-reliant on it, we have no idea on how exactly we might be how our actions might be dictated by these tools. Because at the moment, somebody was last year, I was on the conference and they were comparing ChatGPT with Google, and they were saying that, you should check and look at ChatGPT exactly like Google. But I highly disagree. And the idea was that we are checking the sources on a Google, and here we should do exactly the same. But on Google, when you are checking the information, you're looking at the source, right? So if the source is credible, then sort of the information is trustworthy as well. Not necessarily, but this is the tendency. Whereas on generative AI, it sort of creates this word salads where one bit is correct, another bit might be incorrect. And because it's so authoritative, and because it sounds so human, and because it sounds so credible, and because it's so good at justifying this sort of wrong outputs, that as a student, I might be confused. I might start trusting it, and checking whether the validity of it is becoming quite difficult. Now, I might ask you a question of how do we make sure that when we give them the tasks, when we give the students the tasks, or maybe I'll ask this a bit later, sorry, not to spoil this is going to be my last question. Before we go there are 2 more slides left, and then maybe the question, and then we can start the Q&A. So we talked about the inaccuracies. We talked about the trustworthiness. There is a very interesting study that explores the 12 reasons why we don't trust the AI tools, and what to do so that teachers start trusting AI tools and using them more. But the question that maybe we should be asking is not what to do to trust AI more, but what AI tool makers can do to make their tools more trustworthy. Again, it's quite authoritative. in a way, they use their tone, which is quite confusing. And the last bit is, the penultimate bit is the agency, student agency and the teacher agency. And one more bit is the skills. There is at least one study that says that once GPS was created, our sense of orientation and understanding the way of how we find the way has decreased significantly. Which is a quite interesting study for me, because if you ask me to go in a new city without GPS, I'll be like lost in a second. And I've been talking about this with a lot of people, and they feel exactly the same. I don't know how you navigate, even in my own city, sometimes where I was born and raised is difficult without GPS. Whereas before that, people were navigating easily, right? So there is the certain level of a risk that we might lose the certain skills by highly automating them. So the question is, what skills are we going to lose by being over-reliant on these tools? And there is a real danger of becoming over-reliant. And I think the whole idea, the whole key of this session is that students should be aware of these risks, that if they stop thinking, they might lose certain abilities of writing, of thinking, and so on and so forth. And then agency, the student agency and the teacher agency. How many times have you been already told when you say something controversial and people tell you, okay, let me check ChatGPT, and you're like, no, that's not very a right way to check information credibility, to check on ChatGPT. So there are certain threats in that sense as well. And then some of you mentioned deep fakes, and this is, I think, is highly connected to the impact that students should be aware of. So when they use these tools, what is the large-scale impact, political impact, environmental impact, social impact, educational impact? And so what shall we do to raise awareness about these impacts? So just a year ago, I think there was this deepfake released that was telling Ukrainian soldiers, it was a President Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, that was telling Ukrainian soldiers to, put down their weapons and to surrender to the enemy. Obviously, it didn't happen, but it had quite a big impact in that time, before people would understand that it was a deep fake. There are lots of political manipulations possible with these tools. The environmental factor, the energy that is being used, apart from that the human factor, guardrails. I don't know if you have ever heard of them. If you have heard about guardrails, you can just type yes. These are basically a human labor that is being contracted in some underdeveloped countries where, with very little money, they are made to filter information, so label information that is harassing. It's basically for ChatGPT. So you could imagine what sorts of contents they have to look at every day. And the question is it worth it, basically? So some of you might be teaching business, some of you might know the term cost-benefit analysis. It's such a big issue. Is it worth it? And that's something that we have to decide on our own, I guess. Before I reshare my screen, the last bit that I wanted to ask about is, what sorts of tasks can you create to make sure that you are teaching criticality? So for example, like how would you design the tasks that make sure that you are developing those critical thinking? So what to do? What comes to your head? What can you what kinds of activities would you create instead of, let me, okay, here we go. So give students answers. They come up with questions, use them as inputs for AI. Give students and okay, yes, and that would be for, you know, mostly probably for practicing the prompt writing, and yeah, it's also necessary. Brainstorming, reflective activities, mind mapping, yeah, but activities with PBL are a possibility. Okay, project-based learning even, right, Isabel? I would use it to have students create prompts for graphic images to illustrate characters. Interesting. So, for example, in my practice, I can give you like an example of 2 tasks, and then you could see maybe the difference. One is, okay, search and find out information about the World War II. And you could imagine that the outputs from ChatGPT can be, I don't know, either faulty or directed in a certain way because of certain tendencies. And then the next step could be analyze critically, analyze the information that has been given by ChatGPT. Is there anything wrong with it? Identify what's wrong, make it better. And then they would be able to see the, you know, the weaknesses of the outputs, and they would have to work extra hard to make it even better. That's something that I had in mind, but obviously your ideas are also very, very interesting. So I'm going to stop now because we need 15 minutes for questions. Maybe what I'm going to also do is I'm happy to answer all your questions. If you have any comments on the questions as well, and if you want to participate in the question, in the answer bit, you can also use chat or maybe unmute yourselves and say anything you want to say. I'd also get to students. So we have Susanna. Hi, Susanna. You can unmute if you want to. Hi.
Hi everyone, and good evening from New Zealand. Yes, I've got a question for you. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on the AI garden tools that are starting to emerge. So, for example, so they are custom-made tools. They train on moderated materials. That Stretch AI is one of those tools that has been developed by ISTE, and I just wonder if you think these tools, the analogy of the garden, walled garden tools, is because it puts guardrails around the information that the GPT is trained on. And I just wonder if you think that there is potential in there dealing with some of the challenges around safety and privacy issues and bias moving forward to explore in the school setting. Thank you.
Yes. So in my opinion, when we say the security, so these tools, I mean, in charge of these tools, there are people, right? So it depends on whose agenda they are sort of coming from. Guardrails in general are necessary because when we didn't have guardrails, we saw what happened last year when the ChatGPT, for example, was basically giving outputs that was extremely rude and harassing. So it cannot exist without it at the moment. But whether it's going to help or not, I simply have no idea. I don't have much trust, but who knows? I'm just not very optimistic about it. I don't know if I answered your question, but for me, the security issues are so much deeper and higher than just guardrails. Because of the data privacy issues and because of our inability to understand how these systems work and how they can have a real impact on the society. And partially it's unknown because it's been around for just some time. It's just been 2 years, right? And that's why we can not do the full impact analysis of it. But for me, there is already a bit according to which I can interpret that, at the moment it's not very promising, but yeah. Any more questions? Thank you, Susanna, for a very nice question. Nahid,
Yeah, this is Sneh. I'm sure I'm audible to everybody.
we can hear you, Nazmi.
Yeah, thank you. It was really an insightful presentation. A very quick question from my side is when we are using online teaching learning process, we also need to understand we have a diverse students who being enrolled. So when it comes to evaluating such students with respect to the assessments part we have, right? So then how we can go about it, because addressing the diversity is one of the major concern when it comes to online teaching learning process. So how we going to address their need specifically when it comes to evaluation part, how we can really justify with that evaluation, so that the need of each and every learners can be met. So, in short, how are we going to meet the diverse need of every child during online teaching learning process?
Yeah, a million-dollar question. Very difficult. I don't know if you're asking generally or with AI tools, because AI tools in general themselves have a problem of diversity because of the minorities' voices are not very much included, and it's only, natural. For example, I was looking at Georgia. I don't know if I gave you the same example last year, but it's something that comes to my head first time. So Georgia is just 3 million people. And if you look at the education system of Georgia on ChatGPT, it's going to give you an amazing reforms that we have conducted. The reason for that is that in Georgia, we speak in Georgian, and it's not part of the generative AI tools much. So the information that gets about Georgia on the internet is very much dictated by the government because they are people who produce the reports. So you can see that, it's quite biased. Now, these tools might not, be the best for the diversity and inclusion bit. As for how to tackle the, how to understand the different and meet the different students' needs, in general, I would say differentiated learning, which is quite difficult to achieve depending on how many students you have in the classroom. How to use AI tools for that. It's something that will not have a 1-minute answer. It's something that needs another workshop. And if it can be achieved or not is another very controversial topic. So I'm sorry, I don't have a very direct answer on
I
that.
understand, because like when we have in the SEDG's goal, we're talking about inclusive and equitable education. So when we have shifted ourselves to a digitalized education and we are using AI, of course we need to keep into focus how the diversity can be met, because if we're not able to reach to every learner, so then what would be the point of our consideration of using all those AIs? Because in the end what mattered is the output and what learnings you have from those tools. That's very important.
Yeah. So I would
So
say if you want to use AI tools they are not designed specifically. The generative AI tools, they are not designed specifically unless you are talking about the ones that are designed. But let's say ChatGPT is not designed to meet
text,
the
yes.
diverse learners' needs. They are not for that, right? So, but how can you use it? I would say maybe create different kinds of activities using ChatGPT. So, for example, the Second World War example, the same thing, you could adapt it to depending of what you obviously know your students. Based on the students' levels, you could adapt this task to their own needs. If you know, for instance, that that person has a certain gap in that bit, you could give them that sort of exercise, and then if someone has another gap, you would create something similar, but with a different sort of task. But that's something. It's not about AI at all. It's about differentiating, right? It's just the basics, and then transfer it into using AI tools. But the main concept here is that it doesn't matter who, all of them should be aware about AI. And that's the bit that we wanted to emphasize here. Okay. Any more questions? Sorry if it wasn't there.
If we need to prepare, tiny projects, micro projects, you can say that with the help of AI. So, which tools are, very specific so that we can use them in our day-to-day life in our teaching? Because right now I'm working on AI project itself. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think someone else had their hand up before Nazmi started talking. So if you still want to ask a question, please feel free. I think we have time for one or two more.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm Nahid. I raised my hand. And
yes.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And also we have got some critical ideas from there. But I am quite curious to know, because you mentioned a number of challenges that we might have while teaching our students with AI tools. For example, you mentioned that it could analyze the data in a wrong way. Sometimes we have biased information as well. So do you think that this type of challenges prevail in the non-AI classroom as well? I mean, in traditional classroom as well. I mean, teachers sometimes find it challenging to analyze the data, and sometimes some biased information can be given in the traditional classroom as well. So what do you think? Yeah.
Obviously, yes. So I think that generally when there is a lack of critical thinking and analytical thinking, it's the products of these are the fact that we have students who might have difficulties analyzing data properly and so on and so forth. And that in the AI setting, that creates, the problem is doubled. Because and what we are teaching students is the real life experiences, right? What we should at least, I think, aim to teach. And the point that I wanted to make is that even in the traditional classrooms, when we have these sorts of problems, it is more crucially important than in the AI settings. We prepare those students that they are ready to be able to critically analyze it. So I think that if you start generally from critical thinking skills in general, and then transfer those skills on the AI, it would be a great idea. But absolutely, I think your comment is very much relevant. Yes, we do generally have in the traditional classrooms as well the same problems. And when we say traditional, it sort of opposes the AI classrooms, but in reality, the AI classrooms are the traditional classrooms anyway, right? We're just incorporating the sort of AI generated tasks or AI tools into the learning. We don't do anything much different. If I'm wrong, correct me. So yeah, I get your point. Yes, we do have problems like that when we don't have AI tools either. And it's a problem, and we should work on it. We should work on it even more when we have AI tools, because these are some things that, impact them and their lives and their surroundings a lot, and they should be aware of it. Okay, so thank you very much. I don't think we have more time for questions. I just wanted to say a big thank you, and just point out some of the key takeaways. Nahid's question, last question, was highly relevant about critical thinking and developing those skills. My main point would be the slide about teaching and learning about AI versus, with AI versus about AI. I think it's one of the crucial points. You can use the framework to as your guidance when you will be looking at some of the AI tasks, and balancing it out, right? To think about the risks, the benefits, and then to decide what you prefer and not to lose the teacher's agency, obviously. So thank you very much. Hope you liked the presentation, and hope to see you in person somewhere in Europe or in Asia. Yeah, if you have any last comments, feel free to write.
Thank you, Sophie. That was an excellent session with a lot of insights on artificial intelligence in education, as well as quite a few reflection moments, because as you said beautifully and critically, that if you do not know about AI or do not have the attitude to know about AI, you should not teach with AI. And I agree with you on that. And that's why, just to remind all of our mentors, we are doing this session. You'll be working with a group of motivated and really enthusiastic teachers who want to design innovative teaching practice on artificial intelligence in education. So it's really important that you have that foundation where you can reflect on as well why we are learning about AI and what to remember when you teach with AI, or you talk about AI in education with your own students. So just a quick overview of Sopio's sessions so that you remember the key areas. So of course, reflection on your own teaching and learning practices is very important whenever you are interacting with the participants, and understanding the key concepts about the AI model, as well as ongoing trends and ongoing issues about AI, and ongoing key concepts such as generative AI, and fears and promises as well, because you need to look into both sides to understand the topic better. And most importantly, skills and competencies that you need and your students need. And on that note, thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing the UNESCO framework with our mentors. And they are still working on it, and they are developing it. And also, as Sophie mentioned, there are other frameworks being developed by, for example, European Council of Europe and European Union. And here in Singapore, some of the colleagues from National Institute of Education as well. So please keep an eye on those ongoing conversations to stay up to date. And most importantly, the question about agency, as if all of you had a fantastic discussion in the chat box and directly with Sophie as well. Agency is so important, both for educators and students. So do remind the team that you are going to mentor about agency. And finally, of course, it's good to always be critical about your own role as an educator in the setting of teaching and learning. And in this context, your own role as a mentor when participants are designing innovative teaching practice. And today you just had two sessions, one on open education resources last week, and now on artificial intelligence and education. So it's a lot to learn in 1 hour, in 2 hours on two major topics. So hopefully you will have some time to read about the concepts, and as well as some of the resources that we have shared in your mentor's brief. So do check them out. And if you have any questions for Sophie as well as our speaker from last session, do send them to us, and we will try to coordinate with them to give you answers on those. And finally, we of course record the sessions, and if you need to revisit, if you need to kind of understand some of the concepts better, we highly recommend you to watch the recording. We will be sharing them with you soon as well. So with that, on the content side, let's give a big thank you to Sophie for such a wonderful session. And with that, let me share with you what's next. So I'm really excited to have a session with you on the art of giving feedback. And you will hear from some mentors about their experiences so that we know what empowering mentorship means, as well as what, how to be a good mentor. So that will happen next week, same time, and then virtually, of course. So hopefully, if you have any questions regarding the past sessions and the future session as well, keep us in the loop, write to us so that we can support you accordingly. And tomorrow we are going to welcome the participants that you are going to be mentoring. Really excited about it. I will keep you posted, and yeah, and then can't wait for you to meet the participants as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for actively participating and sharing your opinions, as well as your fears, hopes, and knowledge as well. And we look forward to see you next. So thank you so much.